Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Flourish FM, a podcast for the good life. Our guest today is Dr. Michael Mannino. Michael is a neuroscientist, AI expert, educator, and philosopher whose work sits at the intersection of artificial intelligence, ethics, neuroscience, and optimal human performance. He is an adjunct professor and has taught AI ethics, cognitive psychology, critical thinking, and applied neuroscience. Michael has led multiple initiatives focused on the responsible development, education, and application of AI, including serving as the director of the AI Center at Miami Dade College and the director of programs at the Institute for Data Science and Computing at the University of Miami. Michael's current work integrates brain science, technology, and systems thinking to optimize team performance. What drives his work is a belief in human potential and consciousness, particularly how science and technology can be used to expand it responsibly. Now, Michael writes a column for Psychology Today, and a very recent article he published in there, his most recent article in there, is entitled Human Flourishing in the Age of Godlike Machines. It's a fascinating article. I highly recommend watching it, and it's included in our show notes. And the key points for that are that well-designed AI can strengthen compassion, creativity, and moral judgment. That self-evolving AI marks a turning point in delegating the architecture of intelligence, but that over-reliance on AI risks loss of skills, agency, and resilience over time. And we discuss some of these points in this conversation, and these evolve into further points of discussion throughout this. We kick off our discussion about AI and flourishing with Michael by asking him about what the relationship between AI and human flourishing is and how AI has changed the way he thinks about human flourishing. And Michael describes some of the key potential benefits of AI and some benefits that already presented themselves for AI and human flourishing, and some of the negatives, the risks that are increasingly showing themselves to be evident now, such as the phenomenon known as cognitive offloading. This is where people use AI to save them needing to make strenuous cognitive effort on certain tasks, but in the process miss out on the benefits of hard thinking, such as improving thinking skills through cognitive exertion. He talks about the current trends for AI, how it's most being used, and points out that it's most being used. The main way AI is being used today by people is concerned with mental health. People are using it to try and help them with various mental health issues, help them improve their own mental health, and what the risks are about this, the dangers, but also the potential benefits of this, for example, for therapy and for coaching. It's very limited research that's right now. We discuss how this could potentially promote human flourishing, but also hinder human flourishing. And throughout the conversation, Michael sews into it various ideas that are core to key theories of human flourishing, such as in positive psychology and the human flourishing program at Harvard, and connects it up with current developments in AI. He then, towards the end of the conversation, shows us a fascinating prompt he's designed for a way that he uses AI. One of the prompts he presents to ChatGPT, which gives him a personalized flourishing plan. And towards the end of the episode, he describes this long, thorough prompt that he enters into ChatGPT to provide a detailed flourishing plan. And that's a really fascinating takeaway towards the end of this episode about if you can train an AI model based on research and human flourishing and train it to really give you, critical responses and push you hard with the questions it will then ask you in response to questions you'll ask it, how it can give you potentially very useful resources connected with human flourishing. It's a fascinating conversation. Michael is an expert on AI and has a fascinating background in neuroscience and philosophy. Love this conversation. This is AI and Flourishing with Dr. Michael Mannino. Dr. Michael Mannino, how are you doing?
Very well. How are you doing? Thank you, gentlemen.
Very well.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, good to see you guys here. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. I love this topic. Excited to dive in. And I love your podcast in general.
Thank you so much. It was a real honor to have you on the podcast with us. Great to catch up. I'm really looking forward to digging in deep today into your work in AI and flourishing. And you've recently published an awesome Psychology Today article on this, which we enjoyed reading, and we'll try and sew that into this conversation. So you're an expert on AI, and let's start by diving right into the relationship between AI and flourishing. Has AI changed the way you think about human flourishing, Michael? If so, how?
Yes, AI has definitely changed the way I think about human flourishing. And I suppose that you guys have defined flourishing quite well on your podcast and had all these amazing guests. So probably don't need to dive into how flourishing is defined, but I think about it.
Michael, can I push back there actually? Because I appreciate everything you said, but as a scientist, not everyone agrees on what flourishing is. So I'd like to hear what you think still. You know what I mean?
I think it's a scientific framework, a broad scientific framework for understanding what it means to live a good life. And now that the good life phrase has some philosophical connotations, but I think scientifically we can look at that at the level of psychology and at the level of neuroscience and at the level of culture, like cultural neuroscience as well. But on an individual scale, and let's say an individual scale and a collective scale, right? Like I think so on an individual scale, there's the framework in positive psychology, the PERMA model, sometimes PERMA plus V, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishments or achievements, and then vitality. So I think, in fact, I wrote about this in my article. Harvard Human Flourishing Program released a global flourishing study, which they looked at 200,000 people across 22 countries and broadly defined flourishing in terms of like different dimensions, like financial security, happiness, well-being, creativity, relationships, purpose, and so on. So I think looking at those dimensions, it's probably, and there's an applied aspect of it too. So it's how do I flourish, right? What can I actually do in my life to increase those things, because those things are good to have, right? And so that's a value judgment. It's not. Just want to say one more thing here that I was just thinking of. It's a value judgment. It's not really like factual. So there's a scientific definition of flourishing. But then there's also values as well and value judgments. And I think deriving the latter from the former is probably not a good move. As John, in philosophy, we know, deriving values from facts, right? Deriving ought from an is not necessarily the best move logically, but I think there's still an applied aspect of this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how did it change the way you think? How has AI changed the way you think about?
Yeah, but on an individual scale and on a collective scale, AI it's twofold, right? It's like any other technology. It's a double-edged sword. It can really amplify and augment and enhance our human flourishing and what it means to live a good life, and it can also be very pernicious and detrimental. So the way I think it's changed flourishing is it's like us taking a sledgehammer to flourishing. In other words, like it really can, amplify things, as I'm saying, or it can hold things back and be a detriment to things. Like pouring gasoline on a fire, right? Like if we're trying to, and maybe that's a bad analogy, but like if we're trying to think about what it means to flourish, and what kinds of like positive psychology interventions we can do, what kinds of scientific studies we can look at. AI just takes those and like magnifies them, right? The possibility of them. And so that, am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense. So let's, but it sounds, as you're describing, it sounds mostly bad. I mean, pouring gasoline on a fire is bad.
Right. That's probably.
So let's talk about the ways in which it can be good and it can be bad. So we tease out these differences. So in what ways do you think it's producing good things for human flourish, helping people flourish more, if you like, or changing what it means to flourish? In what ways do you think it's dangerous to flourishing?
Yeah. Well, it can help with a lot of aspects of flourishing in terms of like creativity. AI can enhance creativity very much so if used in the right way, if we collaborate with AI in the right way. And by the way, I was just speaking on the individual scale. Then there's the collective scale in terms of like technological unemployment and all of these things. So that's another issue, which we can get into. But in terms of like being positive, I think AI can absolutely enhance purpose, meaning, flow. The number one in terms of like positive emotions and mental health, like the number one use case in 2025 of AI from Harvard Business Review, at least, was therapy and companionship.
Oh, wow.
So people are using AI a lot these days for mental health and therapy. In fact, so much so that there's a lot of concerns now. And so 2 states here in the United States have actually banned the use of AI for therapy, which is very interesting because there's a lot of concerns about it. People are developing relationships with AI now, and which is very serious. In fact, there was one case, and not to be so negative, but I'll be negative a bit in this.
This is fascinating. Please go in deep.
We need to flesh these things out. But there was a case last year where a high school student ended up committing suicide based on developing a relationship with this AI from a company called Character AI, I believe, if I remember correctly. But there's a lot of companies now coming out where they're having AI as coaches and therapists and counselors and these kinds of things, and it's doing really well, like in terms of mental health and ameliorating mental health and mental well-being. It's doing very well. It's meeting all these benchmarks. It's performing well. There's some very interesting studies out there. Of course, there are concerns because it's like over the counter, right? There's not necessarily so many regulations and policies right now on how to do that. These companies have to be, have compliance frameworks like HIPAA compliance and so on. But everybody, if you just have an account to ChatGPT, you can go on and have it know you because of memory and give it more context and give it more data, and it could be your personal therapist. But without any kind of training or fine tuning or regulations, it becomes just like a free for all, and that could be very dangerous. And we are seeing signs of that as well. So,
right. Do you think, Michael, this is more than just another tool? And the reason I ask is everything you shared so far actually just really resonated with me. Maybe with you too, John. I don't necessarily know all of your, kind of teaching history, but, I came from a space where, my PhD was an early adopter, like hybrid program. A lot of it was async, online, remote sort of deal. Yeah. And then we quickly, at the school I was working at, we were bringing in laptops, we were bringing in devices, because 15, 20 years ago, it was, look at the people we can connect these kids to, look at the information we can connect them to, look at the world we can potentially open up. Fast forward now, everyone's got a smartphone in their pocket. We're looking at a very different impact on kids that a lot of people initially were just trying to help, right? And that's what stuck out to me, because what I hear is it depends on how you use it, right? But am I oversimplifying? Is AI even bigger than that, or is it just sort of the next iteration?
That's a great question. So right now, the AI, it depends on how you use it. Right now, in the short term, and let's say for the past few, I don't necessarily say years, but like 6 months to a year, it absolutely depends on how you use it, and using it in the right way and having the right mindset to collaborate with AI. That means knowing how to prompt, right? And being a better prompter, and the whole thing of prompt engineering. So in the short term, it's how you use it. I think in the medium term, in the longer term, it's going to be much more than just how you use it, because it's going to know us so well. So, and that presents a very real concern and danger. I think it's more, to back to the first part of your question, it's more than just a tool right now, and it will definitely be more than just a tool like a calculator or a smartphone. I guess is sort of what you're asking, right? AI is shaping cognition itself, and it's reframing our cognitive processes, and both at the level of cognition and psychology, but also at the level of the brain in terms of neuroplasticity as well. So we've never had a tool that simulates cognition itself, right? And that's why it's more than just a tool, because it's simulating cognition. It might actually have cognition, and intelligence, and maybe even consciousness in the future, right? But we've never invented a tool ever that is we've never invented a tool that is mimicking the tool maker. and like the internet or the printing press or the smartphone or whatever invention. None of that has simulated cognition in such a real way, so much so that it also fools us and starts doing things that we do, like deception, like maybe even empathy. So it is much more than a tool. And the other thing I'll say is that, and even creativity, and we can get into these things, but it has agency, I think. And that makes it much more than a tool, right? Like an instrument to use things. I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago where I put in a video of Steve Jobs, and he was comparing, and this was when he was being interviewed, he was first releasing the Apple computer. Basically, he was comparing the computer as a bicycle for the mind, because humans, we couldn't go very far as other animals in terms of like running. He read this study, but if we created a bicycle, we could go much farther than any other animal, much more energy efficient and so on. So he basically made this metaphor or analogy where he was comparing a computer for the bicycle for the mind. I think that, and that was with computers, right? Just with computers. With AI, the bicycle is, I take that analogy further, it's starting to steer us. We're not steering the bicycle and riding the bicycle, but the bicycle is starting to have an effect on us cognitively. And so I think that's why what I mean by agency, this capacity to do things and accomplish things and have voluntary, judgment and autonomy to be able to do things. AI might actually have that now. It will definitely have it in the future, but it's affecting our own agency. And in that way, it makes it much more powerful than just a tool.
Yeah. No, this is powerful stuff, man. Many things you said there really resonated. One particularly powerful quote you said then, we've never had a tool that you said maybe replicated or simulated the tool maker, which was a nice way of putting the power of this. Let's go back to a couple of important things here. Have there been, on AI as a therapist, have there been studies yet that have shown the efficacy of this, the success of this? Because you were kind of toying about whether this was both a good thing and a bad thing. A good thing that more people are able to access therapy for free, effectively, because it's through AI. But there's bad implications to this. You gave, a really bad case, the case of a school student who committed suicide because they formed a relationship with an AI bot of some kind. Have there been studies yet that have shown the efficacy of it, for example, for reducing rates of depression or anxiety and so
on? Not so much. And by the way, the case of the high school student committing suicide wasn't really therapy. That was a relationship, right? So I don't want to conflate the two. There hasn't been so many studies. People are working on that now. There's some research. There's initial research on all of this, right? AI's relation to everything, and AI enhancing education, personalizing learning, mental health. But the initial results show that AI can, and even for there was one study for elderly folks, actually can perform quite well in terms of enhancing mental health and developing a therapeutic alliance and so on. So there's some initial positive results. The danger that I was referring to is that there's a lot of unconstrained use of this kinds of, like this particular use case. So in Harvard Business Review, when they say the number one use case is therapy and companionship, it's just, everybody, it's a free for all, right? So there's no constraints and guardrails and what are called system prompts put in place. There are companies that you can go on and have an AI therapist and pay for that. And in that case, there are some guardrails, there are some system prompts behind the scenes, and there are some constraints and compliances that those companies have as well.
So very different than self-directed prompts, which anyone can do, right? There's a certain level of, you're never going to stop this if somebody wants to try to make it happen. But that's very different than, we advocate that you should use it in this way. It can help you in this way. It's backed by good practice in science and ethics, et cetera, right? Which you're saying is a bit of the wild, wild west at the moment.
Yeah, everything's the wild, wild west with AI. There are even some reports and anecdotal evidence about AI inducing psychosis in certain people, and giving bad advice and so on. So there's a lot of very real dangers. There was one study that came out very recently in 2025 in terms of they looked at like classic positive psychology interventions, PPIs, and they looked at gratitude, like doing a gratitude practice, and self-affirmation practices. And they found that, and I read this like a little while ago, but there basically was no difference in using AI for, it didn't really help over and above like a standard gratitude practice without AI, or a self-affirmation practice without AI. But in the second study, in the one with the self-affirmation, the subjects did report an overall increase in life satisfaction from doing the self-affirmation practice with AI, over and above just doing it, without AI. So that was very interesting. That's encouraging. So there's a there. And that was a specific protocol and experimental methodology, and it was a study, so they tried to eliminate confounds and so on. So I can give you my own personal experience with AI. It absolutely helps me with my mental health and mental well-being. Oh, wow. I can give you all kinds of examples. So I'm a father of a 5-year-old daughter, and I created a custom GPT for being a better dad.
Wow.
And it's amazing. It helps me out. It is awesome. If something happens every day, I go into it. I say, what can I do? It gave me such great examples to help me with my daughter. One tip that it gave me was when my daughter wants something in a store and I don't get it for her, she can get a little perturbed emotionally, doesn't know how to handle emotions, starts crying and blah, blah, blah. So it offered me a suggestion to take out my phone, take a picture of it, and let's put it on a wish list. And it's working. It works great. So things like that. I created another custom GPT for helping me with my like existential anxiety with AI itself, actually, which is very interesting. So like all kinds of examples.
Hi, everyone. This is just a quick break to thank one of our sponsors, the Shipley School. We're extremely grateful to be supported by our friends at the Shipley School, an institution that has served as a trailblazer of well-being education for decades. Educating to Flourish is an approach to educational practice that promotes a focus on actualizing human potential. While this means continuing to prioritize the development of traditionally academic competencies, it also recognizes that these competencies are a small part of what leads human beings to live good, impactful lives. Using data-driven methods backed by various scientific fields such as neuroscience, educational psychology, behavioral economics, positive psychology, and more, the goal of Shipley's approach is to cultivate flourishing, the synergistic combination of well-being and optimal performance. Shipley aims to do so for all constituencies that make up the entire Shipley community. For more information about the Shipley School and Education for Flourishing, visit shipleyschool.org or contact Dr. Sharon Russell, Director of Student Support and Wellbeing. Thank you.
Hi friends, Nick here with just a brief interlude to share with you an update on one of our newest partnerships with the Anti-Fragile Academy. Throughout John and I's conversations with many, if not most, of our guests, one thing has been made really clear. In order for people to flourish, thrive, experience the good life, they need to develop the capacity to not only navigate and endure, but ideally grow from the bad, grow from unpleasant experiences. That's why we're thrilled to be partnering with our newest sponsor, the Anti-Fragile Academy, an organization that I co-founded with Dr. Adam Wright, Director of Mental Performance for the Washington Nationals. At the Anti-Fragile Academy, we work with adolescent athletes, executives, and educators to help them understand some of the science, not just of optimal performance, but of well-being and anti-fragility. the ability not only to endure and bounce back from unpleasantness, but to actually come back stronger, to grow from it. Between Adam and I, we've worked with Fortune 100 companies, Inc. 300 executives, Division I programs, and elite professional athletes and Olympians from all over the world. To find out more about how you can leverage anti-fragility training, check out our website at theantifragileacademy.com.
I'm also curious to make explicit whether or not you feel like we have, I'm not even going to say data, but it seems to me in the way you're talking about it, you have this, let's call it human or like cellular level impact, right, of AI, where it's changing the brain, it's changing cognition.
Yeah.
And my kind of educated guess is that AI itself, let alone the study of AI and maybe any causal implications on those changes, is too young to really start to understand yet, right? In some ways. But I would think, and you can challenge that if you want, but here's the more important point. I would think it is much easier to bridge a lot of examples that, like you just shared, where we can take frameworks like the human flourishing, measure out of Harvard, or PERMA you mentioned, or any other measure, and say, on a behavioral level, on an applied level, how would I practically use a tool like AI or prompt engineering to impact? Because what I heard you is I use it to improve my performance as a father. I use it to improve my relationships as a father, right?
Correct.
And those would fall under some of those frameworks you started at. So really my question is kind of twofold. Would you push back or agree that it's too early to know some of those like cellular level implications? And number two, and more importantly, maybe we can move forward using some of the flourishing frameworks and say, well, how would I use AI to kind of play with my emotional ratio, right? How would I use it to work on meaning and existential crises and things like that, right?
Yeah. And I want to go back and talk a little bit about neuroplasticity. We can talk about that as well. You just reminded me. But explain a little bit more what you mean about affecting at the cellular level.
Well, you're saying that it changes our cognition, it changes our neuroplasticity, right? It's literally altering how our bodies would have otherwise potentially been, right? So to John's original sort of question and to the topic, how does it impact flourishing? I see you arguing, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, two levels. One is the applied behavioral, like how do I use this to impact my subjective well-being, enhance my relationships, do all the things that John and I talk about with guests all the time. But I think, and this is where I might be misunderstanding, you're also offering it's changing the way human beings are constructed and structured in some ways. And so my head went to, well, damn, what are the implications on flourishing of that level? Does that make sense?
So, I think that makes sense. And now you're like kind of getting into the concept of cognitive offloading and so on. So at the level of the brain, again, that's what I mean by, I was going back to this, Steve Jobs's bicycle for the mind analogy, and now artificial intelligence is starting to steer us. So it's much more than just a bicycle for the mind. In that sense, it's being more than a tool. And the mechanism by which it's affecting us, I think, is synaptic plasticity or neuroplasticity. And it's doing this in multiple ways. It's changing the way we pay attention, much more than social media, right? Much more like than the what Tristan Harris calls the attention economy, or the curation AI that he calls, right? He talks about now creation AI, like this idea of generative AI. It's really it's like curation AI on steroids, because it's affecting the way we pay attention, what our filters are, creating ultra echo chambers, affecting our way to discern what's true from what's false, right? So there's a very real epistemic disruption that AI can actually have on a collective scale. So attention is one mechanism. Dopamine and reward mechanisms pathways is another way it's affecting.
Sure.
It's changing the way we learn itself, right? So neuroplasticity is all about learning, but artificial intelligence is actually changing the way we actually get information and process informationally, like as the brain. So that also has an effect. the idea of embodied cognition is also amplified, right? So embodied cognition or embedded cognition is this idea that cognition comes from not just the brain, but also the body and its context and its environment. And so we have to think about the mind, not just as existing in the brain, but also, in the body and how we move and interact with the world and so on. So, that the classic example is, I have to think of my mind as part of my phone. If you could see my phone here, because my phone numbers are in the phone, and how many phone numbers do we actually remember now? They're all in the phone, right? So my mind is like also in the phone. If I don't have my phone, then I don't have a part of my mind. So AI is really amplifying that embodied aspect into like another thinking partner, right? It's distributed into my computer, and I'm collaborating and being creative, which I have a term I call meta creativity, that extends into the artificial intelligence. And so that's another way that it's affecting the level of the brain in terms of plasticity. And one more thing to say real quick before I lose my thought is, everybody knows the phrase neurons that fire together wire together, which is largely true. Let's just, crudely say it's a crude statement it's pop neuroscience. Right. But there's also the other way around. Like there's this reverse idea, right? This reverse neuroplasticity that, everybody's heard of the phrase use it or lose it. I have this phrase that I wrote about in my article: neurons that don't fire expire. Right. And so there's a very, very real concern. We're not having brain rot, not yet. A very recent study came out from MIT on ChatGPT use for writing, and they actually measured brain activity. And that study got a lot of controversy and pushback. So a lot of people interpreted the results of that study as having brain rot. There's no brain rot yet, but it could have. There's a very real concern in the future about plasticity gone really bad from AI.
What did that study show about writing in AI? Did it show it was good on benefit good or net benefit bad?
Net benefit bad. So they called it cognitive debt. So they basically just had people, like students, write essays and then write them with ChatGPT. And so talk about cognitive offloading your cognition or this cognitive process of writing to AI. So what they did was they had students write with ChatGPT and without ChatGPT, and they measured their brain activity while they were doing so. And they found less brain activity, less neural activity when they were using ChatGPT to write essays. When they came back several months later to remember what they had written, the students who were using ChatGPT had largely forgotten. There was less cognitive engagement with using ChatGPT. And so the reason why it got some controversy is because people were taking the results and really running with them in ways that they probably shouldn't have been. And you would expect that, right? You would expect if you're using a tool to do something, there's going to be less engagement and probably less brain activity. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. Like if I have to go on Amazon and order toothpaste or something, I have to perform a lot of subtasks to do that, right? I have to go on the website, look for things, check prices, make decisions, value judgments, blah, blah, blah. So, but if I just say, Alexa, order me some more toothpaste. She was going to do it. I have an Alexa in my room here. Then there's going to be less engagement, right? And less brain activity. But that doesn't necessarily imply brain rot and all these things. So,
of course. Well, I mean, that study doesn't surprise me at all, given what we know from the science of learning about the relation between effort and learning. That the more effort you make cognitively, the more you learn, the more you retrieve. And if you're using GPT, you're making less effort, right? If you get it to write something for you as opposed to writing it yourself, or get it to write it sort of half for you, assist you. But
and that's a real danger. Learning
exactly.
Good things in life take friction and effort and difficulty and challenge. So that could be a danger.
Is it fair to say, and sorry if I'm stepping on you here, John, but that just as you two are going back and forth, like one of the kind of early frameworks that you can maybe use to think about AI is the ways, okay, sure, it can enhance creativity, it can be a second brain, those sorts of things. but how do I target it to use it intentionally to offload the things I don't want to spend my cognitive energy on, right? To your point. And because my initial reaction as always somebody who's felt a little like pushbacky against education as a teacher as well, when you said that, it was like, well, and John, you're going to hate this, but I was like, I don't know that every human needs to know how to write an essay. So like, why are we using the AI? You know, and I think they hope like there are many cases where I and another human would struggle to communicate something because of various differences. I would actually want AI to help translate that in that case, right? I don't really care if they can practice the written word or not, and they might not care if I can. It gets into a larger conversation about how we use it and why we use it and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But, that's where my head went.
So, and John, maybe you can appreciate this too, being a philosopher, but, even with a lot of people say now we should write down things with pen and paper instead of like using an iPad or something digital, right? Because it engages, and it does. It engages more areas of the brain, and learning is better, and so on.
Memory,
and these things. Plato actually argued that writing would, right, John? Writing would lessen the soul and lessen our ability for, to acquire wisdom and things like this, right? So, I mean, it's not the first time we've seen these things, but it is the first time, like AI is a fundamentally different kind of technology than anything we've invented before. So we cannot, there's a very, very real concern. So
it's we need to be thinking about how it's impacting us, our neuroplasticity, our attention, our ability to learn, right? We also can look at it from the standpoint of how we can eliminate some things we don't want to devote cognitive energy or time to, right? A great offloading tool, automating tool, whatever it might be.
right.
Maybe now we can come back to where you started to take us earlier, which is some of the practical applications, some of the like applied strategies. You gave up some great personal examples earlier. Are we starting to kind of study those a little bit more explicitly? Are you seeing those out there in the field a little bit more, real specific designs where it's, can we help somebody increase their sense of meaning, through working with an AI agent or whatever it might be? What are you seeing out there?
Well, let's in education, there's actually a couple of very interesting studies. But yeah, I think it boils down to right now being AI literacy, really doubling down on critical thinking skills. I think we need to do this collectively as a society and in the context of education. But prompting is a creative act, or it should be. Right, I would say, and being a better prompter in the short term is an amazing skill to have. Right,
it's generative,
right, a meta skill, like learning how to learn, resilience, creativity, adaptability, anti-fragility, right? All of these things, critical thinking, metacognition, curiosity. All of those things are what we should be doubling down in terms of moving forward with using AI, and just in general because of the ubiquity and universality of AI in the future, and because of artificial general intelligence, which we can talk about as well. But I would say prompting is a great skill to have, and that means techniques that go along with prompting, iteration. Going back and forth in a feedback loop with artificial intelligence. It means asking the AI to ask you clarifying questions before it answers, right? So with all of my prompts, for example, or let's say 90% of my prompts, and something that I'm particularly doing is to, before you answer, ask me 3 or 10 clarifying questions to make sure you understand what I want. For example, that is what's been called the sense check, right? So that is an amazing thing to do. There's a concept called meta prompting, which is prompting about prompting. So asking artificial intelligence to help you ask it what you want it to do. So you can create prompts that help you do that, the different prompt workflows. There are all sorts of different prompting techniques like chain of thought, zero-shot prompting, few-shot prompting. These are technical terms. But the point is that learning those and being intentional with the way you prompt prompting is programming, right? And so I think it's enormously important. And in education, let's go back. That was a general framework, right? So specifically,
Sure.
like let's talk about education real quick. They're like, this is why ChatGPT or OpenAI and now Google released their study mode. If you've seen that, or in Google, it's called guided learning. Yeah. So now I think it's on the free account too for both of them. In the interface where you prompt, there's a little tool button, and you could click those tools, and there's a bunch of tools that you could use. One of them is called study and learn, or study mode, in OpenAI and ChatGPT, and it's amazing. It is amazing. So you want to learn or study about anything. Normally AI is very sycophantic, right? It's pleasing. It gives you the answers, and study mode puts a halt on that. So if you want to learn about a particular topic, it guides you through, it slows you down, it asks you questions before it just gives you a whole long feed of an answer or output. And it's super good. It's very helpful. Gemini just added their guided learning for that as well. And it's great. So basically what they just did is they have a system prompt. They have specific constraints and guardrails. Maybe that's a technical term for your audience, but a system prompt is just a prompt that the AI has behind the scenes that you don't see or use, that gives it a role, it gives it guardrails, it gives it constraints, it gives it certain ways to format to output the output on, and so on. So that's what they basically just did with study and learn, and it's great. So, but in general, the few 4 or 5 studies that have, maybe like 10 now, that have come out in the context of AI for enhancing learning and personalizing learning, what they're doing is having a human in the loop, having AI assisted tutoring, and have the AI be guided by the human to have good output and not just give people and students the answers. So there are prompts that can help the AI do this.
So to illustrate, thank you so much, Michael. To illustrate this, I know that you would like to maybe discuss a flourishing prompt today. What's an example of?
Oh, yes.
Would be?
Well, so I could give this to your audience as well.
Yeah.
I think this
Please
would
that'd be awesome.
This would be a great addition. Let me see if I can actually get it out. Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, we circulate quotes and reels in the episodes. Maybe this would be a fitting thing for one of those as well. We put it in the newsletter as well.
Yeah, that would be great. So I have a flourishing prompt.
Awesome. Tell us what it is, and what it does and so on.
It's a long prompt, so maybe I won't read the whole thing. I can read to you a shortened version of it, but it basically goes like this. So help me design a personal flourishing plan. Guide me across key domains of flourishing life: health, meaning, purpose, relationships, character, creativity, and financial security. Don't just give me advice. Ask clarifying questions, challenge my blind spots, and push me to think in new ways. Suggest both immediate, practical steps I can take this week and longer-term strategies that will matter over years. Show me how to build habits, systems, and rituals so the plan is sustainable, not just aspirational. Help me think in terms of phases and how to measure progress and recalibrate when needed. Draw from psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy, but keep the tone human, accessible, and realistic. Throughout, balance encouragement with constructive pressure so I don't settle for easy answers or surface level fixes. Remind me to connect daily actions to my larger vision of the good life. At the end, ask me one reflective question that forces me to reconsider what flourishing truly means for me right now and how that definition might need to evolve over time. So I put that prompt in, and it gives me a very comprehensive, because it knows me, it has memory as well, because I use ChatGPT most of the time, 99% of the time. And it just gives me a really comprehensive flourishing plan that I can keep check with and re-put that prompt in and get more updates and weekly things that I need to do, that I can do to, keep me going and increase my well-being. And it's amazing. It's great.
And you can output that as like a calendar file where it's got recommendations of certain practices you do each day or each week and so on.
Yes, absolutely. You can now with GPT-5 that was just released a couple of weeks ago, and with Gemini, you can do this as well. Is create a little UI, user interface dashboard that has all of this for you that you could just go back to and check boxes and click it. It's very, very helpful. It's awesome. I have another prompt that a close friend of mine has given me. It's give me the good, the bad, and the ugly about myself. So I recommend you do that.
Wow.
Put that prompt in. Give me the good, the bad. If you use ChatGPT,
once you've trained it,
you give it context and so on. So it's super helpful. And then just say, okay, give me a plan to optimize, and so on. So these are ways that I intentionally, again, back to Nick, your point earlier, is to use AI to, how can this help me flourish in my relationships with my daughter, for example, or my wife, or my career? How can this add meaning to my life? Like, you ask those questions and then you put in specific prompts to address those particular issues, then you're applying, right? Then you're using artificial intelligence to increase your flourishing and well-being.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, we're going to start to wrap here. Usually we would take you to, what we kind of call our flourishing question, but I actually think you just sort of organically nailed it. And the question is generally, if people want to get started with whatever topic we're covering in that episode, in this case, AI, what's a great way to get started? And the prompt you just delivered, I think, is a really great way. All that said, when I share that question with you, anything else kind of pop to the top of your mind that you just really want to make sure that you leave listeners with as we start to wrap?
Yeah, two things I would say. One is increase AI literacy.
Okay.
Digital literacy or whatever you want to call it. But I think having a solid grounding, like foundational knowledge about what AI is, how to recognize it, how to use it, how to collaborate with it, what are the trends, where it's going, all of these will have major impacts on the way you make decisions in your daily life. So like everybody has some sort of literacy about the internet and Google search and so on.
Sure.
I think the same thing should be with artificial intelligence now. Especially the young folks. And the second thing is always consider the way you're using it. So use it responsibly. As you guys know, I teach AI ethics, so I'm very passionate about responsible use and responsible frameworks and just considering, the ethical considerations about how to use artificial intelligence. So use it intentionally, right, and responsibly. I think this a broader AI ethics issue that I'll leave everybody with is, I think one of the most important questions facing humanity now is actually an AI ethics question. It's a philosophical question. It's like, we're creating a new species. What do we do about it? What should we do about it? Right. And I think, Aristotle talked about we must philosophize, right? We have to philosophize just by being humans. Mm-hmm. AI is a forcing function on that. It's going to make us really address who we are, what our purpose is, and what we're doing with our lives and where we fit in this universe in a way that any other technology has not done so far. So I think that's why we need philosophers, I will say, and ethicists, and liberal arts and humanities, more importantly now than ever, moving to our future.
Wow. Well, that's an awesome, bold, positive note to finish this episode on. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Mannino. This has been fascinating. So in our show notes, we'll add a link to your Psychology Today blog and your most recent article there, Human Flourishing in the Age of Godlike Machines, and other links to your work, such as your TEDx talk and your social media links. Anything else you want to mention about work you're doing to our audience while we're on air?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for the opportunity. Yeah, I would love to. So I'm working on AI ethics issues and I write my Psychology Today blog, as you mentioned, working in the field of AI education. I also have a startup as well. We're working in the field of collaboration, like human collaboration and human connection. So trying to use artificial intelligence to get people in sync, literally increase their synchrony and increase the way they communicate, cooperate, and collaborate, and understand human dynamics. So it's a fascinating field.
Amazing. Is your LinkedIn page the best place to find out about all this stuff?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's in the show notes. We got you there. All right. Thank you so much. Michael Mannino, Dr. Michael Mannino. Thank you, all of you, for watching and listening today. This has been AI and Flourishing with Dr. Michael Mannino.
Thanks so much for listening to Flourish FM. We hope you enjoyed the content. Please be sure to leave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcast and on all major social media platforms.
And if you visit our website, flourishfmpodcast.com, you can sign up to our newsletter. We send out a weekly newsletter. First newsletter of every month, we share a long-form blog. And every newsletter, every week, we share highlights from our previous episodes. Please hit subscribe on our website.